Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first in our five-part panel discussion series addressing some of the fundamental issues and opportunities of Canada's EV charging infrastructure. I'm Nino Di Cara, the founder of Electric Autonomy Canada, and I'm delighted to introduce the first episode in this series, EV Charging Reliability, which is sponsored by Flow. From home stations to commercial sites to entire fleet conversions, Flow delivers comprehensive charging solutions from hardware and software to ongoing network support and driver applications. Flow's products are simple to use, convenient and reliable, boasting a network performance of over 98%. We're grateful to Flow for their support of this discussion. Today, in our first episode, we're getting right to the heart of a key issue affecting EV drivers and the industry as a whole, and that's the reliability of public chargers. Now, we know that around 60% of Canadians have the potential to charge their EVs at home, but many rely on public chargers for day-to-day charging sessions and, of course, longer road trips as well. This is critical infrastructure that we have here. When a driver charges and experiences a failed session, it can not only be inconvenient, but also costly and potentially dangerous to their journey, not least to say detrimental to the whole EV transition that we're trying to achieve. The factors affecting reliability are many: power at the site, internet connectivity, activating a payment session, a broken connector, or there could just be a snowbank or a parked vehicle in front of the charging station. So how do we measure, report on, fix and maintain a healthy national charging network for EV drivers, regardless of who the site host is or who the network is operating it? Well, we have a tremendous panel of speakers who have stepped up to talk about this, and I'm pleased to introduce you to them now. They are Brent Hartman, Director of Fuel and Transportation Standards at the CSA Group; William York, Senior Engineer, EV Services at ATCO; Donna Sanker, President of Parkland, Canada; Frank Fata, Global Head of Utilities and Energy Partnerships at Flow EV Charging; and my colleague, Emma Jarrett, Managing Editor of Electric Autonomy Canada, who will be moderating today's discussion. And with that, over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Nino. So the definition of reliability, just to kick us off, is a quality of being trustworthy, something that performs consistently well. And very pleased to have everyone on the panel here to talk about, how you feel that issue of reliability ranks in terms of the concerns the public has when they put their trust in the EV charging ecosystem. So, Frank, perhaps you can kick us off. How important is reliability?
Thank you, Emma. That's a great question. It's an all-encompassing question. It includes a lot of different variables to the calculus of reliability. When you think of the importance or the priority that we should put on reliability as a sector, as an industry sector, I think it's quite a high priority. I mean, when you think of it from the perspective of the customer or the user experience, they expect their charger to be up and running, to be clean, to be legible, for the payment system to work, for the charging cable to be long enough, but especially to serve that power that is so critical to them for the journey.
Great. Donna, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, look, range anxiety is real. If you visit a gas station and it's out of fuel, you likely know there's going to be another one within a few blocks. But if you're in an EV and you run low on range and the charger isn't working, that's obviously a big problem. And so I think having a reliable system of chargers that customers can count on is frankly mission critical for EVs.
Thanks. William?
I think it's not preventing people from becoming EV owners, but it's preventing EV owners from enjoying the experience for sure.
And Brent?
Yeah, I think others have covered it well, and the importance here. And I think another way to look at it is, we've mitigated a lot of other threats. The technologies commercialize and charging and battery experience continue to improve. We've overcome a lot of safety challenges, I think, and to William's point, right? People are interested in buying EVs, so we do just need to focus on that customer experience. So I think reliability is really kind of the logical next step to address here, but also to recognize, right, we've mitigated a lot of threats already, so I think we can address this one as well.
Great, Brent. And in terms of EV adoption and the impact that reliability has on that, how might a standard for EV charger uptime influence that one way or the other? And is the CSA doing work on this in your day-to-day, and can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So maybe I'll start and kind of reverse and start with what CSA has done in this space, and then how maybe we can help in the reliability piece as well. So our role is really as a standards developer, we develop and utilize committees to really kind of harness knowledge of our expert members, and then take those members through our accredited process to develop standards for different industry sectors. So one of these is obviously EVs. We've been involved in EV charging standards for over 10 years. So now we're really progressing from having that base standardization for the charging equipment, some of the components, circuits, plugs, receptacles. Now we're looking at, bigger issues, kind of the whole system, how batteries, charging, the electric utility, the grid, how they all integrate, right? So kind of the systems-based approach to EVs and looking at how they play a role in energy storage demand and how they might power homes or the grid. So it's been this progression of the industry from those single components all the way to kind of this whole system. And with that in place and emerging, right, we're starting to focus on some of the deployment challenges. So we have the base safety standards. So now let's progress into how we can help the actual deployment as well. So we are looking at different topics. We're looking at performance, interoperability, accessibility, reliability, availability, all related to charging equipment. And we're going to develop a guideline on these issues to support, jurisdictions and stakeholders that are interested in deploying EV charging. And even beyond that guideline, which will address all those topics, we do plan to start work on a standard specifically for reliability in 2023. So we are going to work on this, and I think maybe to the question on, how might this impact uptime? Yeah, we'll have to see how the scope develops here, and there's a lot of factors to look at here. But I know some of the considerations we've been looking at are, right, you need to understand the definitions, the factors for reliability. Industry needs to be speaking the same language on these terms. You need to determine the acceptable levels of reliability. We are hearing pretty high levels, up to 97, 99 for governments that are investing public dollars in EV charging. So they obviously want that to be reliable. You need to consider, how is it going to be monitored? How will there be reporting? Will there be regulation? Will it be mandatory, voluntary? Who's the appropriate authority? So you got to think about that aspect. And finally, I think the last aspect we have to consider in the impact here and what we can achieve is the role of harmonization. So basically, harmonization is having same or similar requirements in different jurisdictions, right? So how important is that for reliability? Do we just need to focus on the national level? We just have a Canadian harmonized national standard? Do we need to look regionally? So is it important to be aligned with the US on terminology? These vehicles are likely to cross borders, so maybe it is wise to have similar terminology and requirements there. And then, also the aspect of international, how important will that be in looking at international standards or international requirements? So yeah, that's kind of where the CSA is at and the EV standards. And like I said, moving toward reliability here. But yeah, a lot of considerations and things to iron out, I think, before we can really understand what impact a standard might have. But ultimately, we think a standard can help increase reliability and uptime.
Thank you. And, Frank, because Brent opened the door to the US, let's go there. Obviously, Flow is involved with co-sponsoring a similar type of bill to what we're describing here about charger uptime. So, is that something that Flow advocates for in Canada, kind of a sister cousin type of bill? And in the absence of a legislative policy about uptime to adhere to right now? What strategies is Flow using to ensure EV charger reliability across its own network?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, the whole topic of reliability and the whole question about the legislation and the bill that was passed in California by Governor Newsom, which coincidentally was reelected, thankfully, last night for California. The whole topic was triggered by a University of California at Berkeley study that showed fewer than 3/4 of the chargers that they visited were actually up and running, 72.5 or so, and I think that's embarrassingly low for our industry. And when you think of less than 3 out of 4 chargers ready and able to work, I think it was a call to action for us because of our role and a responsibility for delivering not only the chargers but also the network upon which they're all connected and upon which they roam and interchange user experiences across different networks across the US. I mean, there's over 70,000 of these connected networks on the broader shared network for the Flow network alone. Now you start adding on all of these roaming networks, and you've got 200,000-300,000 of these units, and at those numbers of inoperable units, you really start to amass a pool of chargers that are not able to satisfy the need of these EV drivers. And what are we doing to all of our collective efforts to encourage e-mobility, encourage decarbonization, if our own units as an industry do not meet the reliable expectation, right? Reliability expectations. So, we've partnered up. In this case, it was with Charger Help, and we put together some legislation. It did get passed in California, and I think the crux of it all was really to seek transparency. When organizations are using public dollars to deploy charging infrastructure, transparency, I think, is very important for the public to know. After all, it's their dollars that are put to work and being put to use in these projects, and that they should know what the performance or what the deliverable has been and how much of that deliverable was realized with public dollars. So I think transparency is a great way to track these projects, to monitor and manage the expectations of these projects. In Canada, we're not specifically targeting or advocating for policy, although we do have a dedicated team in covering Canada, East and Western US with policy experts that can either take some positive action and interact proactively like we did in California, or really provide some expertise as a consultancy relationship where we can share our lessons learned and where we think the industry really should move towards in terms of taking action for legislation or standards and so on. It's something we really believe in. Raising the bar, I think, is going to benefit the entire industry, and eradicating these inoperable chargers is I think very key to the customer experience at large for our industry. And I think that really is being addressed and really needs to be tracked and monitored and try to hit that 97, 98, 99% plus reliability bar that we're trying to establish in the market.
Thanks. So, William, we're talking about two different types of maintenance. Basically, we have software, which, happily, a lot of it can be done over air. And then we have the hardware, which requires, a person to stand in front of a charger and deal with the issue. And, in a country like ours, we always hear that our vastness is both a blessing and a curse. So when it comes to physically maintaining the hardware on Canada's charging stations, what are the challenges, from the perspective of just getting there, first of all, and making sure teams are nearby, but also the training available to the engineers and charging operators who are going to be entrusted with caring for them?
Yeah, good question. just to set the context, ATCO in 2019 built Alberta's largest network of universal fast chargers in Southern Alberta. So we selected Flow as our vendor. Each site has a 50 kilowatt fast charger and a level 2 charger right beside it. And this spans Calgary to Montana, Canmore to Medicine Hat. So we have entire Southern Alberta coverage. And we learned a lot through deploying this network in 2019. So it's been operational for a couple of years now. And one of the biggest things we learned was to buy a big inventory of spare parts. That was a big learning. And we did that almost right away. We derived our utility principles of sparing inventory and took that quite seriously. So whenever we do experience a failure, we're not at the mercy of Flow or supply chain. And Flow is actually a great vendor for support. But we get that part and we drive right to the site. So I think our biggest challenge is actually our sprawl. As you said, Emma, it's a lot of windshield time, so that drives up the cost for maintenance. And actually a lot of your day can be spent driving and not actually on wrench time repairing the charging station. Regarding training, it's less engineering training, I would say. The electronics engineering behind these charging stations is actually quite complicated. So what we do is we hop on weekly calls with Flow, our vendor, and we have our electrical techs that maintain one of our 500 kV DC transmission substations down in Brooks, Alberta. And we hop in this call and we diagnose and troubleshoot issues. And our technicians were trained by Flow. They flew out to Alberta and went to our Nisku fabrication facility where we had lots of Flow chargers that were in production for Peaks to Prairies. And they walked them through the charging station and the electrical diagrams, and that's how they became familiar with it. And actually that same day, it was interesting. We were commissioning a charging station in Canmore, and there was an issue with it, and they actually used our electrical techs to diagnose the issue. So on day one, they solved the problem, which was pretty cool. But yeah, that's what I would say, is that the core competencies for troubleshooting and repair are actually not an engineering function, more so a technician function.
I like that story. Nothing like a real world experience to cement a lesson.
Yes.
So Donna, we've heard from three great experts in this arena, very technical, very complicated, nuanced issues. Parkland is facing this. The company's made its intention to have its own EV network known, and now it's the ball is rolling. So, when you hear everything we've canvassed so far, and then compounded by how important EV charger reliability is in the mind of the customer, you mentioned off the top, it's mission critical for Parkland. So what does that look like in terms of how you're preparing for this, and how is Parkland planning on monitoring and responding to uptime issues?
Yeah, so just quickly, for those who don't actually know who Parkland is, because you might know us by our fuel brands, every day over 1 million customers in 25 countries actually rely on us to provide for their fuel and convenience store and food needs. And so if you buy fuel at Chevron in Canada, if you're at Ultramar or Pioneer, if you might shop at an on-the-run convenience store at actually an M&M food market, you're likely one of our customers. And so, as you noted, we are launching a EV network, and we're starting in British Columbia. And as I noted, availability is quite critical for the network. I mean, truthfully, if the chargers are not available, then we're not generating revenue, and we're also, creating a negative experience for our customers. So I guess a couple of things that we're thinking about. The first is really, charger reliability can often be a problem at sites with older equipment or slower speed chargers. And so, as part of our technology partner, the provider of the chargers, we've, selected an ultra-fast charging partner with a network of that they've got an excellent performance track record. We also believe that redundancy or multiple ports, multiple chargers per location can help mitigate the impact of downtime and allow more customers to charge their vehicles. As far as how we monitor and respond to issues, There's several ways in which we monitor, and I think this first one is probably the most important, and that is that we're installing the network at our existing stations or locations where there's a live person at our sites who can help 24/7. On-site staff are trained and check on the chargers multiple times during the shift. If they discover a problem that can't be resolved with like a simple reboot, they'll submit a ticket to our technology provider support team, who will first try to troubleshoot the issue and remotely fix it. If it's a hardware issue that can't be fixed remotely, then we have a service provider that has a 24-hour service available that will be dispatched to the site to repair the issue. In addition to having our kind of on-site staff checking, we also have two ways to remotely monitor if our chargers are having issues. The first is through our technology provider, and the second is through our app. We have connected our charging network with our loyalty app, which is called Journey. Customers can use Journey to start and also track their charging session, but the app also is running proactive detection for us to ensure that the chargers are available. And so we've got a number of ways, in which we're watching to make sure that we're up as much as we can be.
And is there a response time that Parkland is targeted?
Really, as I mentioned, our cashiers or our on-site staff will be monitoring the equipment multiple times per shift, plus the remote monitoring software. If an issue is identified, the idea is to get it back up as quickly as possible. We do have, detailed service level agreements or SLAs with our service providers, but the idea really is, to get it back up and running as quickly as possible.
ASAP is the official answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brent, circling back to you, we talked a lot about the stakeholders earlier and the different types of considerations that come into establishing a standard. Are you confident that we have the engagement from the appropriate stakeholders needed in Canada happening already, and it's just a matter of corralling everybody together to make the standard, or are you concerned that we're still missing key components?
So yeah, I think we largely know the stakeholder base just through our work over the years, right? So I think we feel pretty good that the stakeholders are there. Right, the challenge in standardization, I mentioned, what we really do is harness the knowledge of our expert members. So right, you need those people to come to the table, and we need the stakeholders to, come and support standards development. If this is, like we talked about right out of the gate here, about it being a key threat, then we need to identify how we can utilize the standardization process to make sure that we develop the appropriate standard to support reliability and uptime.
And in terms of like making this actionable, if I wanted to contribute my thoughts to a standard, how do I go about doing that as a stakeholder?
So there are a couple ways. Right, there's sort of primary membership. So, once again, we do accept membership applications. It's volunteer members that sit on our committees and help us work through the standards. So there's that way to participate directly in those meetings where we're trying to get consensus from the different members. And right, we do have participation. We do require balanced interests. So we do need all the voices at the table. We do need end users, manufacturers, utilities, regulators. We need all those voices there at the table to come and kind of work through the consensus at the meeting. The other aspect is, ways to contribute is all of our standards do have a 60-day public review period. So all of our standards before they're published are available for anyone to comment on. So that's another way to contribute. If you can't come to all the meetings, you can monitor and kind of see when it's available for review and provide your input at that time. And all those comments do go back to the committee that developed the standard.
Great. And same kind of timeline question that I fired at Donna, start to finish, about how long does it take to get a standard?
Yeah, we've been getting faster and faster. It's anywhere from 12, 15, 18 months. But right, like I said, it's driven by volunteer experts. And I think the sooner they want it, the more motivated they are. We can change the pace of the meetings and have them meet, with as many times as they need, as kind of like short as intervals possible, just to make sure that they're getting together and getting the work done so that it can get, reviewed by the public, balloted, and then published.
Thanks. So Donna and Frank, you both talked about the reliability aspect of it and how it's important to you both in different ways. Like Donna, obviously, it's from a consumer perspective or customer perspective. You want your customer to have faith that when they show up, what they're looking for is going to work. That's a brand credibility thing. And Frank, for a network operator like Flow, you want to be able to have stellar metrics in order to get more clients. So with those two built-in incentives already for both of your respective spheres to have good charger uptime, is a formal standard redundant? Like, is it needed at all? I'd be interested to know if you think there's enough incentive already there.
So, from our perspective, if we invest capital, we want to get a return on that investment. And to get a return, we need to reliably deliver our products and earn the customer loyalty. And so, I would say for us, the logic is no different than how we operate our fueling business today, where the number one priority is to be operational so customers can, get what they need to power their journeys. And so I think, really, we have good incentive to be up, regardless of whether there's a standard.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. I think a standard can only help to elevate the importance of this critical infrastructure. I think at Flow, being that we're a vertically integrated company, not only do we operate as a network provider, but we also design and manufacture these units. So I think intrinsically the units are built with enough quality that the reliability needs to be baked in. And from a customer experience perspective, I mean, throughout our roaming agreements and different networks that we operate upon, I mean, you're looking at a user community of over 360,000 users. That's 900,000 transactions a month on the network for Flow alone. So if there's any opportunity for us to improve that experience, improve our quality of delivery, then by all means, there's an 800 number on every charger. If there is, I mean, we can't see everything from our network operations center. Like Donna was saying, we can, throw technology at this. We can have our 24/7, 365 network operations center proactively monitoring these units so that an anomaly can be tended to before it becomes an outage. So this is how you manage and maintain that uptime. We invite our community to interact with us. It's there's the Flow app, there are the partner apps, and there's the 800 numbers. I mean, you won't get a voicemail. I mean, the phone will ring, and after the third or fourth ring, you have an actual technician pick it up in the network operations center. We want to know. I think it's part of our brand identity that we really want to differentiate our product above and beyond the rest, really setting the bar high. Reliability is what the customers expect. I mean, look at these other services that are out there. You think of cell phone service. If we had a 97% uptime requirement for cell phone service, we would have 45 minutes of outage on a 24-hour period. No one can live without a cell phone for 45 minutes a day. So it's that type of expectation that the broader market, the consumer market, really is expecting from this critical infrastructure. And we keep promoting it as critical infrastructure. We keep promoting it as the way forward to decarbonize and so on. But I think we also need to own up to the responsibility of putting out some products that meet that expectation and can take care of the customers and surpass their expectations on reliability.
Thanks, both. William, I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned earlier, like right off the top, which was that you didn't think that charger uptime will have a major impact on like negative EV adoption or slower EV adoption. And I would love you to expand on that. Why do you think that?
So in addition to being a senior engineer with ATCO, I'm also on the board of directors of the Electric Vehicle Association of Alberta. And we're a nonprofit whose goal is to accelerate sustainable transportation. And over the past couple of years, we've talked with more than 20,000 Albertans. I can't recall a single time that an Albertan has asked whether charging stations are reliable. They actually care more to see them and know that they are there in key spots. So folks that are on the fence about buying an EV, they're not yet thinking about this. It's when you actually buy the EV and start to experience that ownership experience that EV reliability starts to play a factor. And now maybe you could make the argument that an owner would tell a negative charging experience story to someone else, and that might dissuade them, but I'm not seeing that yet. I think really where we need to focus is on redundancy rather than reliability. We need to see more ports per site rather than targeting this 100% uptime, because at the end of the day, a cord could get cut, or you could experience some random episodic failure of a component inside a charging station, and just things happen. But if there's more redundancy, there's more ports per site, I think that would go a long way to fixing this issue. Like as a Tesla owner, Tesla puts 6 to 12 stalls per installation, and I never experienced a reliability issue. And ATCO's guilty of this too. We didn't install enough ports per site, and it's a capital issue. There's just not enough capital going into these networks right now to address the redundancy that they need.
Thanks. And for the whole group, at some point you've all alluded to places where this issue is being tackled well, where they have good strategies that maybe we could replicate here. So I would really like to hear more on those wins, if you will. William, I don't know if you want to keep going and tell us where you think is doing well in the world.
Yeah. Have your employees use electric vehicles to go repair the stations. That's what we do at ATCO. We bought them an electric vehicle. So they're incentivized to actually get it working, because they can't return back to home unless they get that station working, but it allows them to test the charger. So when they repair the fast charger, they use the CCS port to test if it's working. They test the J1772 level 2 while they're there. The only thing they can't test right now is the CHAdeMO, but it wasn't an option in 2019, but there are options from the market now to do testing on the fast chargers. I think that's very key, is getting an electric vehicle and actually testing that the hardware is working before you leave site. That would be one of our biggest learnings in the last couple of years, and I think it's one thing that we're doing kind of uniquely here in Alberta that I'm not seeing elsewhere in the province or in the nation.
It's a very crafty strategy. Brent, I think it was you who mentioned other governments that are monitoring this issue well. Who are they?
Yeah, so yeah, just that. Yeah, I mean, we've heard in kind of the public, some of the public funding options. So I can't recall who was. I think New York and California. I don't know if they have specific targets yet, but kind of kicking around that's where I've seen or heard the 97 and 99% uptime for their investment. So yeah, I think the other piece, with CSA being more on the standards development side and actually the EV, actually putting in EV chargers themselves. I think another key point here in strategies to use, right? This in many ways is a disruptive technology, right? It's the little shift in regulatory frameworks and consumer behavior. And I think, I think the more industries in emerging technologies, the more that those stakeholders think about where there may be challenges and how standards can enable that. Because oftentimes, right, a challenge hits and then it's, we probably need a standard for that, or we should have thought about standardizing, rather than thinking out of the gate where there might be standards that might be needed so that they're in place when you have a product ready for the market, instead of developing a product for the market and then realizing we probably need a standard for that. So I think just being proactive in that, I think will be helpful. And then Emma, I think to your point earlier about how to get involved, hopefully I've highlighted that we do rely on stakeholders to really support standardization. So I'd be happy to connect with anybody who is interested in participating or learning more about CSA's initiatives on reliability.
Thanks. Donna, from your perspective, any retailers doing this well that you're looking to, or are you trying to set the bar?
Of course, we're trying to set the bar, but I think, based on what we've seen, and we're looking, all around. We've been looking in Canada, in the US. We took some of our team took a tour through Europe, actually, and saw some of what was being used elsewhere. And I'll comment on the overall customer experience in addition to reliability. I think, there are certainly some good examples, but there's lots of examples of where they're either poorly located, it's not well lit, they're unreliable, or they don't have amenities. And so I think, as you think about when you're recharging your vehicle versus when you're refueling, refueling is designed, basically it's 2 minutes from start to finish, you're in, you're out, but the EV charging, is going to take at least 20 minutes likely. And so we think EV customers need more than just a plug. They need convenience, they need food, restrooms, and a seamless digital experience. And so I think, we're excited about the opportunity to have folks visit us for 20 minutes as opposed to the 2 minutes of in and out. And so I think, all of those things we're seeing as either very well executed or very poorly executed. And so that gives us some ideas of where to go.
Yeah, like looking at the gaps as you notice them, it's a good strategy. And Frank, just to top off the conversation, any strategies you've seen around the world that you think could be replicated here?
Certainly, we don't have to go too far. I mean, Flow provides product and service across multiple segments, and I think that lends well to this topic because we can really learn from whether it's the residential charging environment. Multi-unit residential charging is also a challenge in and of itself. And then we've got chargers that are installed at the workplace or on the city curbside in the public domain for fleets, and along the highway, like Donna was talking about, a 20-minute experience. But to have equipment that serves all these different segments, you really do start gathering lessons learned and different customer experiences from these different types of charging. One thing specifically in New York City, for example, where they're experiencing unusually high utilization, which is great. I mean, they've really overdone their, they've surpassed their uptime expectation, and they've gone beyond 99 up to 100.0% uptime. But I'll tell you what the secret sauce is for that, and for those listening that are considering an RFP or considering, deploying chargers, whether it be in the behind the fence for fleet or in the public domain, you really can't expect even a quality charger to deliver that type of uptime if it's just installed and forgotten about. It really needs to be maintained. From an operator's perspective, you need to have hands on these units once or twice a month, really depending on the type of abuse and exposure they have in the public domain. I mean, these units are going to be handled pretty roughly. Folks don't, use these things like they own them, like they do in the residential sector. They yank them around, and they do take some unusual abuse. And these remote monitoring software systems do not. I mean, I don't get a software trigger if someone spray paints the charger. So you really need eyes on these things. And like I said, we can rely on the broader community of users or passersby that want to report in a charger. We do have, climate change champions out there, or EV champions that are not EV drivers, but will report cables down or cables cut or vandalized. And all of that, kudos to them to help advance our broader initiatives. The rising tide, floats all boats kind of approach. We can all succeed if we all partner through this together. Reliability is the topic of the conversation today, but I think it's more of a collaborative approach, not so much a brand specific strategy.
Great, and that leads us really nicely into our first audience question, and the chat is very busy, which is great to see. So thank you everyone for chiming in. Someone would like to know, to your point, Frank, you can't be everywhere at once. So how do we get more people to use PlugShare Charge Hub to check in and report information about various chargers ranging from, max charging speed, or problems with it, like failed charging sessions. Too often, PlugShare check-ins are not current enough to instill confidence in EV drivers to visit an EV station.
Well, we don't have a direct responsibility for the data on other platforms, although on the Flow network, it is in quasi real time, connected to our database that, like we say, proactively monitors the status of these chargers. And it isn't just the online offline status, but we do receive a number of very specific data points. Temperature of certain components and the quality of the cellular signal. So there are lots of different things that we can interact with. I'm sorry if folks are having some blind spots as to the actual availability of the charger or the health index of that charger. And maybe that's an example of where the industry really is moving towards. I mean, folks are the expectation is very high. Their customer experience is very technically detailed. Just looking at the question, they're not satisfied with just knowing it's online. They want to know about the amount of power that they can expect, how long their charge will take according to their vehicle. And one thing, though, that we're doing to get that technology integrated into the customer experience, we're working with folks like OEMs, like General Motors, for example, on their Ultium 360 platform. It's an in-vehicle information system. You'll be able to book a charging session, and with that, because it's vehicle specific, you'll get some time estimates on how long your charge will take. If you're looking for a complete charge or just a charge up to your next waypoint on your destination, those types of conversations are happening with Flow and the automakers to deliver that type of data. As far as a third party that is scouring the internet for data they can display, I think there's a challenge there in and of itself to keep up with the innovations in technology.
Great, and Donna and William, I'd love to hear from your perspectives. How is there a benefit to that very grassroots crowdsourcing model that exists currently to figure out where problems are with chargers and try to get attention to go and get them fixed? Or if there is a more targeted way that could be better.
I think a targeted approach is probably more helpful, because if whoever owns or operates the charger needs to be notified that they have an issue, then they can fix it if hopefully they choose to do so. And so I think using whether it's the 800 number, the app, for us with our on-site staff or whatever it is, kind of getting right to the heart of the matter, I think would be a faster way and a more direct way to get the information to whoever is operating it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think PlugShare is kind of a near-term solution it was really meant for like non-network chargers and these onesie twosie chargers that are installed in the middle of nowhere. But longitudinally, we're going to need direct interaction with the charging station owner operators. That's really how this takes off. And I go back to my comment about redundancy. We need more ports per site. That's what's going to fix it. But we do monitor PlugShare. ATCO does on a weekly basis to see if there are plug issues or just site issues, vandalism, that sort of thing. I notice a lot of stickers on our charging stations when I check out PlugShare, so I like that.
Thanks. And Brent, we have a CSA question for you. Following up on regulation, who'd be the stakeholder responsible for, if I'm interpreting the question correctly, responsible for meeting the standard? Is it the site operator? We need these issue tickets opened ASAP and not by the retail end user.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I think that's something a standards committee would need to consider, right? Because there are different models for EV charging, and yeah, who's really responsible for maintaining that? So that's where I think a standard could kind of lay out, okay, if the utility is responsible, if the installer is responsible, and kind of lay out, the different models and kind of what needs to be accounted for there, or how the different parties that might have responsibility, how they might report. So yeah, it's hard to say, but that's where I think standards can come into play. And then, the appropriate authority, or if there is, kind of a regulatory piece that comes in there, can decide kind of how to utilize that, or kind of lean on the standard to, answer that question.
And part 2 was, how are you planning to measure reliability? The Berkeley study showed that issues such as broken guns happen, and this is not easily detected by the charging operator.
I think mentioning earlier kind of the definitions and the factors, or the methodologies to determine how to measure the factors, that's something that the committee will have to work through. And yeah, if there is existing literature, methodology, studies out there, that's something that committees look at when they're developing a standard, right? It's hard to start a standard from a blank sheet of paper without looking at what's been done externally. Oftentimes there's a lot of relevant work that can be drawn, and we do want our standards really evidence-based and have them being formed by actual data. So I think if there are studies out there, that's something we would the committee would draw on in developing the standard.
Thanks. And William and Frank, I think a couple questions that have nudged at this, but in Canada, do we know what the leading cause of charger inoperability is? Like, are there some common buckets that the issues fall into?
Just to touch on that point about detecting cable breakage and so on, when you have access to good data, we're looking at applying artificial intelligence to some of these situations where a specific unit that has utilization patterns could be looked at. And when the patterns are broken, then you may ask yourself, is the unit inaccessible or broken? So that's one way where AI can also play a role in helping with reliability and uptime by anticipating the usage, and then intervening or having an attempt to investigate a potential anomaly before it really becomes impactful to the uptime. In terms of some of the most common, I think it's just a lot of the different payment interactions are also highly scored as a difficulty on that Berkeley study. So a lot of the screens, these units may look real nice when they're brand new, but considering the type of weather that they go through, especially in Canada, you really do need to look at the robustness of these screens and in the extreme operating zones of the unit. So I think temperature is a factor for some of the fancier screens and some equipment that aren't built as robust.
Yeah, I would say that the reliability issues we've experienced so far have been a mixed bag for the most part. The one hardware failure that comes up most often is gateway failure. And unfortunately, gateway failure just makes your charging station useless. Like they don't work. So we did at one point talk about what if we just made it so that the charging station defaulted to free charging if the gateway was down, and then once it got back up, its memory would store who charged, and then it would bill them appropriately. And there are some fraud risks with that, but it's something I would like to continue exploring because I think it's worthwhile. And it really makes no sense if it has electricity, all the hardware is working, and all that's not happening is a handshake between TELUS and your charging station is preventing the energy from getting delivered. It seems like such a stupid obstacle.
Love the hand up, Frank. What's that?
Yeah, I want to encourage William a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I think there's also, again, the vertical integration. So you can build these things into the charger. If there is a network outage, like William was saying, members of the Flow network, if you're a card carrying member with the RFID card, that Flow unit will authenticate once you use the RFID card, even in the absence of a cell phone network. So it recognizes you as a member and will store up into a queue the different transactions. Once that network connectivity is reestablished, then the transactions are then sent back into the queue and consolidated. So there's hope, William, but it is true though that across the different brands and technologies out there, that type of approach, if you're not vertically integrated, the hardware blames the software vendor and the software blames the network provider. So there could be multiple, levels of finger pointing when units are down. So less chefs in the kitchen helps to alleviate those situations.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's an interesting avenue
Yeah.
to go down. Donna, I wanted to rope you back in because this next question, again, it's one of those interesting possibilities. And because, Parkland is not ruling anything out at this point, this question is, why do you think occupancy sensing technology, which is being used inside buildings and parking garages for many years, has not been widely adopted into smart chargers by the EV industry? And I will tack on my own question, which is that something Parkland would consider?
So I would say it's pretty early in the journey of what's to come around technology. At the moment, we're focused on kind of getting the network up and running and getting some base learnings around how it works and how we provide the best experience. And so I would say not something on the radar at the moment, but duly noted, and we'll consider that in the future, but it's not currently in the hopper.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that? I think I would assume that kind of technology helps with moving people through charging stations, either letting you know that everything's full or encouraging people to move out quickly. You're nodding, Frank. Is this something that it's worth pursuing?
I'm not going to open up the kimono, but I will say that in New York City, in order to alleviate the situation about chargers being iced with internal combustion engine vehicles, they did install some cameras to detect and to get ticketing involved in targeting some repeat offenders, if you will. And so that's one way, I guess, of monitoring the environment outside of the actual charger software.
Great, thanks. And William, you have a couple specific questions. How many times have you had a Tesla charger not work? Redundancy without reliability will be less cost effective from an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah, so maybe I'll clarify my statement earlier. I'm not saying that we shouldn't address 75% uptime chargers. That's obviously a horrible metric. But once we get to like the high 90s, I think chasing 9s is kind of counterproductive. And what would be better is to just add more ports per site.
Got it. And a second one, regarding your statement on keeping parts on hand, extra parts, is William suggesting that we add spare parts to the RFP on a contingency line and pre-order ahead of deployment?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And we have, we did get caught off guard though. We can't store every single part that's in a flow charger, but I do have another great story to tell. We noticed a charging station, one of our best performers, down on a Sunday in October. By Monday, we had, with Flow, diagnosed the issue, and a part was on its way to a Staples in Calgary, and it was intercepted by Thursday by one of our technicians that was traveling out to Canmore, and they got it fixed and back in service by Thursday. That's not something that major network operators in Canada can boast about. I've seen charging stations from major network operators down for months at a time. So having the spare stock of inventory helps you only so much, but having a great vendor relationship and a really well-oiled machine working there between your technicians and the vendor is also crucially important. But yeah, definitely talk to your vendor and ask them what the critical parts to store are due to long lead times or their frequency of failure. Cables for sure, because they get cut or they get damaged, and that's a mission critical item. So that's a good question.
And Brent, very quickly, of all the stakeholders you mentioned for a standard, is there an opportunity to build into a standard a better mechanism for issues to be reported with EV charger reliability from the user level? So basically a better app.
I think so. Yeah, I think back to the report, what does the stakeholder base, how do they view monitoring and reporting and all that? And if that's a key aspect, right, that's something that can be built right into the standard. So it really just comes down to scope and kind of how industry wants things monitored, reported, and ultimately regulated.
Great. Well, we have hit the time where we have to break, but thank you all so much. I think I was very excited to get into this discussion. I didn't thank you all for being here at the beginning, so I'll do it twice now. Thank you. Thank you. It's been great having this chat, and Nino, I will pass it back to you.
Well, thanks very much, Emma, and a big thank you to you for moderating the discussion, and an enormous thanks to the panelists as well, Frank, Donna, William, and Brent. You really got to the heart of the number of the factors around the issues, and Frank's point around what you expect in terms of reliability from your other devices, and 97% is just not good enough in a lot of what we expect in life, and we should be really striving for 100% reliability as much as we can. So thank you very much to all the panel for bringing their expertise to the table and sharing them with a broad audience. Thanks to all the attendees for taking part and your fantastic questions. And a big thank you once again to Flow EV Charging for sponsoring today's panel discussion. We really appreciate your support for this. Next week, we have another expert panel for you to discuss how we ready the grid for EVs. And I invite you to visit electricautonomy.ca, where you'll find a link to register. Please make sure you register for that event individually. Thanks very much for all your questions today and for participating in this discussion, and we look forward to seeing you next week.